Hey friends, hit that subscribe, like, and comment to join this amazing journey. Every click powers new content and means the world to me. Thanks for being the heart of this awesome community. The light lost on the midnight cliff, the strange tale of the traveler who never returned. A harsh wind rattled the old sign at the cliff's entrance, flaking the once bright paint that spelled Venshire Pass. Now the letters were half erased by time, leaving only a battered wooden plank swaying in the coastal gusts. Down below, far beneath the cliff's rocky edge, the sea roared and foamed, a constant tumult that seemed to enhance the region's reputation for restless storms. This place was never thronged with tourists, too remote, too prone to sudden shifts in weather, but the watchers, a handful of dedicated local observers, insisted there was more to it than unpredictable winds. They would speak in hushed tones about intangible overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, describing the unsettled presence that lingered near the precipice. Indeed, watchers had long witnessed fleeting lights flitting across the midnight gloom, or intangible silhouettes drifting at the cliff's edge. They insisted that something intangible haunted the site. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, beckoning the unwary traveler to vanish into darkness. Local legends sprang up, each weaving a tapestry of sorrow. A fisherman's wife who leaped from the cliff in despair, her phantom lamp now glimpsed at midnight. A teenage runaway who had ventured too close to the edge, enthralled by a weird glow rising from the churning sea. So many watchers had recounted these overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, that the entire region learned to treat the cliff with fearful respect. By day, it was only an impressive vantage point, a scenic lookout above roiling waters. But after sundown, intangible overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions took hold, forging an aura that watchers described as heartbreak incarnate. Some watchers claimed they sometimes heard faint wails carried on the wind, or glimpsed ephemeral shapes in the corner of their vision. Yet for years, none of these watchers' warnings gained widespread attention. The cliff was remote, and the local stories stayed local. That was until the night a traveler named Jasper Trowbridge arrived. The watchers interpret overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, in how fate led him there. He was an itinerant writer, so the rumor goes, seeking out-of-the-way places to spark his next story. Riding a battered motorcycle, he reached the small hamlet near Venshire Pass just before dusk on a crisp autumn evening. He rented a tiny room above the lone pub, where the barkeep recognized a wanderer's thirst for local color. The watchers recall how the barkeep, a man named Ellis, offered him an ale and began to spin the local cliff legends. Instead of being deterred, Jasper seemed fascinated. He asked pointed questions about the overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions that watchers had glimpsed. The barkeep shrugged, but reiterated that the place was best avoided at night. Jasper shrugged, stating that he'd seen his fair share of haunted rumors. He retired to his room, writing in his notebook well past midnight, according to the watchers who heard his pen scratching behind thin walls. The following day, Jasper roamed the region, taking notes on the wind-lashed crags, the swirling tide, and the battered sign at the cliff entrance. He peppered villagers with questions about the ghost lights, the intangible overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, the half-remembered suicides. Each interview yielded an intangible swirl, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, reinforcing the story. Some watchers warned him not to linger after sundown. Jasper, enthralled by the notion of capturing genuine horror, decided he had to see for himself. The watchers who gleaned this from the barkeep's recollection realized Jasper was well-intentioned but naive. By that evening, the watchers saw him riding his motorcycle up the winding path, a small lantern strapped to his pack. That was the last time he was seen alive. When morning came, Jasper's bed lay empty at the pub's inn. The watchers realized he hadn't returned. The barkeep found his room locked from the outside, no occupant. Locals shrugged, at first supposing he'd left early. But by afternoon, watchers discovered Jasper's motorcycle still parked near the cliff, half hidden in tall grass. Anxiety spiked. The watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions that a tragedy might have occurred. A search party scoured the area, but found no sign of the traveler. The watchers looked for footprints or any trace near the cliff's edge. They discovered a single set of footprints leading up to the precipice. Then, abruptly, they vanished. Overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. No sign of a fall, no scuff marks, no disturbed rock. Just a final print at the brink. One watcher spotted what might have been a small smear of something dark on a nearby stone, but it was too faint to identify. The watchers were stunned. Illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Searching the coastline below, they found no body. The tide was strong, capable of sweeping any remains away, but watchers felt uneasy. Typically, if someone had jumped or fallen, you might find torn clothing snagged on a rock. In this instance, watchers discovered only intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, as though the environment had swallowed him without trace. Some watchers insisted maybe he intentionally disappeared. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, but that seemed improbable. The watchers see illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, indicating that something deeper was at play, possibly the intangible phenomenon rumored to dwell here. In the days that followed, watchers patrolled the cliff at night, scanning for any sign of Jasper or the rumored ghost lights. They saw fleeting glows drifting along the precipice. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, reminiscent of a small lantern bobbing in the dark. But each time they approached, it receded. They heard a faint whisper or moan on the wind, as though a voice was calling from just beyond earshot. The watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as a final testament to Jasper's presence, or an echo of the intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions that claim him. No official explanation emerged. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The local sheriff's office concluded a probable fall, though no body surfaced. Rumors soared that the intangible watchers at the cliff had claimed another victim. Over time, the watchers gleaned more details. Rummaging in Jasper's vacated room, the barkeep discovered a single notebook left behind. Inside, scrawled notes described the swirling illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions he found near the cliff. How at certain times, a pale shimmer of light rose from the water's surface, drifting upward until it vanished near the rocky ledge. Jasper also wrote of a faint sobbing he heard around midnight. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions that seemed to come from the cliff itself. One line stood out: I will bring my lantern tonight to meet the sorrow. The Watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as an unwavering desire to confront intangible gloom. That notebook ended abruptly, mid-sentence. The hush is real. I can sense something that draws me. No further words. The Watchers see illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as a chilling final testament to his unstoppable curiosity. During the next months, Watchers from outside the region began to visit, lured by the story of a traveler who vanished chasing ghost lights. They set up cameras, audio recorders, illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, determined to unravel the midnight cliff phenomenon. Some watchers captured ephemeral anomalies, glowing orbs that flickered near the ledge, faint wails or moans that defied standard wind patterns. One watcher posted a video showing a fleeting silhouette leaning outward from the cliff edge. No one physically stood there. Illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Another watchers reported feeling a cold presence tugging at their clothing when they tried to peer over. The Watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as intangible watchers reaching from beyond. But mainstream critics called it overexposure or illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Nothing conclusive. Meanwhile, local watchers recalled older stories that preceded even the fisherman's wife legend. A battered ledger from centuries ago referenced a weeping spirit on the great rock at midnight. Overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Possibly the phenomenon is ancient, watchers reasoned. Some watchers suspect a tear between worlds at that cliff. Illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Others propose a simpler explanation, shifting rock strata that produce acoustic illusions. Regardless, illusions overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions remain unstoppable. The Watchers glean no universal answer, but persist in investigating. An especially unnerving claim emerged from an older local, Miss Harding, who insisted she once witnessed the pale figure up close. She recounted walking near the cliff at dusk, searching for lost goats, when she spotted a luminous shape on the path ahead. Initially, she mistook it for a child carrying a lantern, but as she neared, the shape elongated, becoming an adult figure clad in shimmering darkness. Overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. She froze, watching it drift to the precipice. Then it turned, revealing no distinct facial features, only a suggestion of sorrow. She heard a muffled moan, like a voice trying to cry out through water. The Watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Ms. Harding fled. She later told watchers that the experience felt like stepping into another dimension. Overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. She never returned after sunset. These accounts feed into the watcher's suspicion that the light lost on the midnight cliff might be more than a simple ghost. Possibly it's an intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions that lures travelers astray, or a cursed presence that demands new victims. Some watchers tie it to local lore about a hungry spirit seeking replacements. They note how each person who vanished, like Jasper, was rumored to have glimpsed or followed the light. Maybe that's how the intangible watchers ensnare the unwary. Illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The watchers find a consistent motif. Each vanish occurred after witnesses or victims saw a faint glow near the edge. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Then a hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions overcame them. As watchers collected these stories, intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions formed around the entire region's identity. Some watchers attempt to rationalize with atmospheric phenomena, maybe refracted city lights or glowing plankton. But no city stands near. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Another watchers propose geological luminescence from rare minerals in the cliff. Yet that fails to explain the moans or the sense of intangible watchers. The watchers keep returning to the personal testimonies. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. They remain convinced something intangible beyond normal science operates here. In an effort to break the mystery, a specialized investigative team arrived, calling themselves the Night Aegis. They boasted advanced gear, thermal drones, sub-audio microphones, motion-activated cameras. Over a week, they meticulously mapped the cliff area. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Daytime scans revealed no anomalies, just a stable cliff top, battered by wind. Then at night, they recorded repeated drifts of low-level luminosity near the ledge. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Their sub-audio picked up a faint frequency resembling human vocal patterns, but heavily distorted. The watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as partial scientific backing. One recorded excerpt was chilling, a near-human moan that rose in pitch until cut abruptly. A lead investigator described the effect as like hearing a cry from behind thick glass or underwater, heartbreakingly stifled. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. However, on the third night, their star researcher, Ms. Lillian Caro, vanished. The watchers found her equipment near the cliff, all cameras offline. As the team searched in panic, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions overcame them. Hours later, they discovered Ms. Caro wandering aimlessly half a mile from the site, dazed and unresponsive. She eventually recovered, offering a fragmented account. She had seen a small flicker on the ground, approached, and felt a pulling sensation. Then blackness. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. She remembered no more. The watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions as a near abduction by intangible watchers. Ms. Caro's partial memory included a fleeting glimpse of Jasper Trowbridge's face, pale and sorrowful, as if he was caught behind a swirling veil. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. That suggests the vanishings might not be simple accidents. Possibly the intangible watchers keep the missing in some other realm or dimension. By now, the watchers recognized unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions in the phenomenon. They debated a direct confrontation. Could an exorcism or spiritual cleansing break the hush? Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions? Some watchers proposed a midnight ritual to rescue lost souls. A local mystic claimed that chanting an old protective incantation while shining a bright beacon at the cliff might free trapped spirits. Illusions, overshadow illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The watchers prepared a circle of salt near the brink, set large torches, recited the incantation. As midnight arrived, a hush overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions overcame them. The watchers glimpsed the ephemeral flicker out at sea. Slowly, the light rose toward the cliff. Tension soared. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Then the moan started, subdued but gut-wrenching. The watchers held their ground, chanting, shining beams outward. For a moment, silhouettes formed in the darkness, multiple shapes. Some watchers recognized them from known vanishings. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. One watcher swore they saw Jasper Trowbridge among them, eyes wide, arms outstretched. The watchers pressed the incantation, hoping to break the intangible bond. But the intangible watchers would not relinquish easily. A gust whipped the torches, nearly snuffing them. The moan crescendoed. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, pressing watchers with intangible sorrow. Some watchers doubled over, tears streaming, as though they felt every lost soul's heartbreak. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The salt circle scattered in the wind, and in that instant, the silhouettes lunged forward. The watchers described it as if the entire hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, rose into a wave. At last, one watcher flung a final measure of salt into the flicker, and a bright flare erupted. Nobody knows if it was a reflection of the torch or some supernatural reaction. The watchers interpret illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, as the intangible watchers recoiling. The silhouettes wavered, flickered, then receded, merging into the gloom with a final, muffled cry. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The watchers collapsed, drained. They had survived, but had they freed any souls? In the subsequent days, watchers found minimal improvement. The intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, lingered at the cliff. The ephemeral lights still appeared. Perhaps the attempt had failed, or only partly succeeded. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Miss Carroll scorned any further tries, calling it too dangerous. The watchers recognized unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, that meddling might worsen the phenomenon. They decided to document carefully, but not provoke. Thus, the watchers concluded that the light lost on the midnight cliff remains an enduring enigma. The intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, that clings to that spot claims new forms with each generation's sightings. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. The final resolution is elusive. Some watchers blame a curse from drowned sailors, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, or a rift bridging watery depths with a liminal realm. Others see it as a physical phenomenon. Illusions, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, but can't account for vanishings. Meanwhile, families of the missing, like Jasper Trowbridge, linger in heartbreak, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Each new rumor hints that maybe these lost travelers remain trapped behind the hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, intangible watchers in the gloom. One watcher's posted an online summary. The Midnight Cliff is no ordinary vantage point. It is a threshold. Something stands guard, or hunts, or yearns. The hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions is not empty. The moan is real, the flicker is real, the vanishings are real. Overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. Official tourism brochures avoid mention, but a quiet hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions pervades local conversation. The watchers remain vigilant, scanning the night horizon for that ephemeral glow. If it appears, they know overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions. A new tragedy could unfold. Ultimately, the light lost on the midnight cliff, the strange tale of the traveler who never returned, stands as a testament to intangible sorrow, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions in a remote corner of the world. The watchers parse each new sighting, each rumored moan. Some watchers vow an unstoppable overshadow illusions approach to gather absolute proof. Others counsel caution, not wishing to join the ranks of the missing. For the intangible watchers perched at cliff's edge, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions swirl each time the hush arrives with dusk. And so the standoff endures. A cliff where the sea roars below, the wind howls above, and an intangible hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, finds an otherworldly light that calls unsuspecting travelers. The watchers can only retell the cautionary story, urging that no matter how mesmerizing the flicker, stepping closer might yield no return. And so the hush, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions remains, overshadow illusions, unstoppable illusions, overshadow illusions, in a final testament that some mysteries are best left unsolved.